This is Community Unity Now, the D-Tycoon Show. This is Bill Morton, President of the Rogers Park Chamber of Commerce, and I am Trudy Leong, Administrator of the Rogers Park Chamber of Commerce. We have with us a very special guest, Hannah Blackwell, who is an immigration attorney. Welcome, Hannah.
Thank you so much for having me.
Mm-hmm.
Our community would really love to know how the migrants that are in the neighborhood, like the Venezuelans, what are the options for them?
A lot of what is happening with the Venezuelan crisis right now is those people are coming in having been told that, having experienced a lot of harm in their country, and knowing all that they know is they need to get out of that harm the best way they can. And so everywhere around the world, America is known as the place to seek asylum and to seek any kind of benefit that might give you a better life, give you a different life from what you have been going through. So what the Venezuelans are doing right now is they are coming here seeking asylum, and asylum is for victims of persecution in their home country. So a lot of people are claiming that what has happened to them in their country is persecution and should be seen as such by the courts. So that is a majority of what we're seeing right now, along with humanitarian parole and other options like that.
What is humanitarian parole?
Humanitarian parole is an option for people who the government will identify as people who have gone through something so vastly horrible in their country, or they're in imminent danger, that someone can petition from inside the United States to bring them to the U.S. to be safe.
Could you give us an example of a country or a situation where humanitarian parole is occurring?
Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Cuba, and Haiti are 4 examples of countries in which they are designated for humanitarian parole right now.
So maybe some examples of what's going on in those countries that qualify them for humanitarian parole.
Sure. So, we've heard a lot about Venezuela, right? So there's a lot going on in that country with Maduro having taken over the presidency. And we've seen reports of a vast number of deaths related to people opposing that presidency, as well as incarcerations. So people are escaping that, knowing that Maduro is not he has elected himself, and so people are escaping that kind of political opinion persecution that's happening in that country. Whereas in Haiti, for instance, there is a massive amount of gang violence, and gangs have basically taken over the government in Haiti. So that leads to a very violent situation there.
So if their life is in danger, political or through any kind of other forms of violence, they qualify.
Even medical. If you had some sort of a medical situation, you might be able to qualify for humanitarian parole, but you need a sponsor in the United States first.
So we have a friend whose son is in Cuba. He's very concerned about him. What can he do to get his son over here?
First of all, he can file, if he's a legal permanent resident or a U.S. citizen, he can file a I-130 petition for his son. That is a petition for family members, immediate family members. So that's spouses, children, parents. Mm-hmm. Those are included in this I-130 immediate relatives. It can extend beyond that, but those are even longer waiting periods, right? So if he is under 21, unmarried, that is the fastest route that he could get to get here. If he is married, he's going to have to find a different option. Unfortunately, they don't extend that past the start of the new, what they call the family.
Okay. And so there's no option to, there's not even a waiting period if he already has a family.
If he's already married,
remarried,
he would have to find a different way to petition, have someone petition for him in the U.S.
Okay, so his father can't petition for him? I'm not sure if he's married or not.
Well, again, I don't know the specifics of I can't speak to a certain case in specific, but generally marriage cuts that off.
Oh, okay.
So of the people you help, what countries of origin are they mostly?
Right now, I have a lot of Hispanic clients. So obviously Venezuela, again, that's a big one right now. Mexico is also going through, I think with the migrant crisis going through all of those Central American countries, Mexico is seeing a lot of uptick in violence as well. And a lot of cartels taking advantage of this situation, making things not only more dangerous for the people passing through, but the people that live there as well. So a lot of clients from Mexico and all of those Central American countries. But, we see from Ukraine as well, and we're starting to see from the Middle East.
And are you seeing a lot of people from around the world trying to come to the United States through Mexico?
A lot of people come to the United States through Ecuador. So if they are not attached to this side of the hemisphere, they will fly to Ecuador, because Ecuador is one of the places in the world that does not actually require you to have a visa for many countries. I can't speak to all. Doesn't require a visa to enter. So they will fly to Ecuador and then do the route up Central America with the rest of the Hispanic population.
Have you seen anyone try to come in through the Canadian border?
Oh, it definitely happens. It definitely happens. But Canada, also much more difficult to get into than, say, Ecuador, Mexico, something like that. So I think it's really the route of least resistance, truly.
What about the Afghanis?
There is a specific carve-out in the law for Afghanis. It was used very much right when we pulled out of Afghanistan.
Right.
So I personally am not seeing a lot of that happening now. Some of those cases are still being adjudicated, but a lot of the people that came under that specific portion of the law have been granted their permanent residency.
And even if they're granted once they are granted permanent residency, then they're qualified to get their work papers. But before they get their permanent residency, they're not able to work, right?
Actually, there are some carve-outs for work permits as well. As we, it's hard to make it without a job here, and a lot of these people really do want to work, which is fantastic. So if someone seeks asylum, for instance, they have to wait 180 days to receive their work authorization, but they can get that before they have an decision on their case, because the backlog of these cases is so long right now.
So in other words, once the 180 days is up, they could get their work papers while their case is still being adjudicated.
Exactly. Yep. And for parole, if they are paroled into the United States, let in to the United States.
Parole, you mean?
Humanitarian, but there's also a parole that they can get if they make if a person makes an appointment at the border with Customs and Border Patrol. They can be granted a parole to enter the United States for a certain amount of time, whether it's a year or 2 years, and they can get a work permit during that time.
Oh, and those don't include students. What people would qualify for that kind of parole?
Anyone would qualify. It's truly up to the discretion of the Customs and Border Patrol officer at the border.
Yeah, because I have some friends at school, and they were telling me that they're so limited as to not being allowed to actually earn money. Students.
Work permits are very, very limited. Yes.
And I've heard about issues with work permits. They want to get a job and they cannot. And also, I've also heard that they cannot get involved in politics. Is that true?
No one who is not a citizen has the right to vote. If that's
not what I'm saying.
Oh, okay.
Be a part of an election campaign. Be a part of supporting a politician. That kind of thing.
Yeah, it might be. Yeah, go ahead.
So, they have the opportunity definitely to express their opinions about any kind of candidate that they'd like to. as far as I know, that is not illegal for them to do. The only thing that would be illegal is if they use that political opinion to vote in those elections.
I think what happened is that they're concerned about the country that they came from might restrict their what they do in this country.
So they're very careful. I've noticed many of them are very careful of what they post on Facebook and who they're associating with and what they're doing while they're here.
I mean, the life of an immigrant without status in the United States or with a status that's in limbo is extremely difficult. You have to walk this line between what is legal and what is not legal, what USCIS will look at or the court in adjudicating your decision and deciding if you're a good person and what they won't worry about. So lots to think about for these people, unfortunately.
So you were talking about medical parole. What is that? Is it like if someone were very ill and then there's the only treatment would be in the U.S.?
Exactly. So people can do this in a temporary type of visa. So they can petition the government to grant them, this 6-month period, whatever it might be, to be able to receive this medical treatment that could only be accessed here in the States, and then return to their country once that is complete.
When you meet your clients, how do you assess what they need? Because maybe oftentimes even they do not know what they actually need.
A lot of people don't know the opportunities that might be available to them. So I do a thorough consultation with each of my potential clients. I'll sit down with them for about an hour and ask them if they've ever gone through any harm in their home country, whether they have been harmed here, whether they've been a victim of a crime. Has anyone ever pointed a gun at you? Has anyone ever threatened you in any way? Something like that. So we'll go through piece by piece these questions that may not seem to make sense, but I know they make sense, and I can put them together into a potential eligibility for a status at the end of the consultation.
We have a friend, and he got stabbed in the gut. He got stabbed in the gut in Rogers Park on Morse Avenue. Does he qualify for anything?
So without knowing the details of the case, not speaking to that specifically, something like that would definitely potentially be eligible for a U visa, this Victims of Crimes in the United States visa, which is a more direct path to legal permanent residency for people who might not otherwise have any options. For instance, people who came in to the U.S. without status years and years ago.
Exactly. And
they have no other way to regulate their papers. If they're a victim of a crime, they can do so that way.
How about
and do you see often a lot of these cases?
Unfortunately, yes.
How about a refugee who doesn't have so much documentation? I've heard many times when they're trying to get a job or they're trying to have their their diplomas, they no longer have them. Maybe the institution no longer exists. Mm-hmm. Do you have stories about that? Does it have any relevance in immigration status?
What constitutes as evidence for your clients to help their petition?
So everyone that applies for any type of status, immigration related, needs to have some form of some way of proving their identity, right? Mm-hmm. So that is the problem that we've actually been running into a lot recently is how do you prove identity when you have traveled through multiple countries and had all of your papers with you, but then you crossed a river and they all got ruined? What do you do then? So we have had to be creative and look for things like baptism records and high school records, anything like that. Even for a child, for instance, if they don't have an ID or a birth certificate, we can use a passport photo and attach it to like a school letter from school verifying their identity. Cross our fingers and hope that USCIS will accept that. But it's a difficult situation. So go back in time and try to re-find these documents that might not exist anymore.
And then when they file to get those documents from their home country, they might not get the cooperation that they need too.
And sometimes we don't want to ask that home country because that is the government of that country is what that person is running from.
Right.
So we don't want to give them any kind of indication that they are here.
Mm-hmm. And they're fearful for their family that remains in that country as well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Retribution. So this process of identifying the person you're trying to help, what does that look like?
Would you explain that a little bit further?
Well,
for
you don't
me?
want to
Sure.
you don't want to contact the government
Sure.
that they're leaving. Who do you contact and how do you do it? What's the process look like?
So if they don't have documents and such, so a lot of it has been if mom or dad are still back in their country, they will be able to either they'll have some sort of file on this person and be able to find something, or the parent will be able to petition the government for those kinds of forms. For instance, a remake of a birth certificate.
Well, our scans, our photos from a camera, like from a phone, if they're clear enough, is that sufficient?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the government acknowledges that these types of things happen, especially when people travel very far to get here. You lose your documents, and if you're running from your life, your first thought is not going to be, I better grab my birth certificate before I leave.
And how about children that are unidentified and separated families?
A very difficult topic. Very difficult. Thankfully, in my practice so far, I have not had to deal with this horrible situation, but it does happen a lot, especially for families whose children have not made it past the border and have died somewhere in the desert. There are organizations to connect the body of that child or that person with the families. So in the death instance, there are organizations for that. But in the United States, after detention, there are also nonprofit orgs who will work very diligently with parents to try to locate that child. Does it always work? No, unfortunately. And that's one of the hard parts about the system as it stays right now.
I had a friend many years back, and she was helping a group of people who wanted to address their addiction. And then they were told that if they were to come to the U.S., probably for the medical parole, they would be able to get their papers. So they did get their papers, but then when they got to the country, got to the U.S., all their papers were taken from them. So they ended up in the U.S., homeless, and their addiction still not addressed, and they're in limbo. And she was trying to help these group of people. So do you see anything like that? And do you have any suggestions for how these people could find help? Human trafficking, that's what it was.
Oh, human trafficking?
Yeah, because they wanted those legal papers to use for something else. So they used those people, moved them here so that they did get their legal papers, and then whoever moved them here took those papers to use for something else.
So when a person enters the United States, if they are detained by Border Patrol for any particular reason, Border Patrol does have the right to take their papers. I know this might be a different situation than what you're talking about. So a passport, for instance, could be taken by the government and held until that person is ordered deported or removed from the United States or granted a status. So those documents, all of these documents of all of these people sit in what they call a cave somewhere down in a southern state, and it is very difficult to get those documents back, get them to the correct person and find them in the first place. You can petition the government to have this done, ICE, but it takes a long time, and they're not likely to be amenable until there's a decision on the case for that person. In terms of human trafficking, if they have been trafficked here and their papers have been taken, there is something called a T visa, which is for victims of trafficking. So whether it's human trafficking, sex trafficking, labor trafficking, anything like that, this visa, similar to the U visa, will help them.
Similar to the U visa, you mean like that visa where victims of crime could... Oh.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. Wow. That's very good to know, because those people have been in limbo for so long, years and years, and all she could do was cook food for them, and then just get them their clean supplies, because they could not address their addiction. They relied on her, and many of them died, especially during COVID.
Yeah.
We have about 5 minutes left. I would like to talk about other resources for immigrants.
Sure.
Do you know do you provide other resources for immigrants, or shoot them in the right direction for housing, jobs, shelter, food? Right
now, I leave most of that up to the state, because the state honestly, quite honestly, is doing a fantastic job getting the immigrants and migrants who are coming in currently assisted with housing, whether it be a shelter or an apartment, food, and all sorts of donations. So, and this is new in the last few years, but these people also have access to a medical card, so they can get help with their medical insurance, which is just great. So all of that is available to them through IDHS. And they can find a lot of information through nonprofit organizations like the Resurrection Project, for instance.
What is that?
Resurrection Project is a nonprofit organization specifically for immigration-related relief.
How do you get most of your clients? Are they referred to you, or how do they know about you and could find you?
Immigrant populations are a very tight-knit communities, right? So truly what has happened as if I help one person and they are impressed with the work that I've done on their case, and they will then tell their friends and tell their family, and then I get people coming to me like that, which I'm very, very grateful for. I'm very grateful for all the clients who have come through my doors and who continue to keep me afloat. I just passed my 1-year anniversary as a law firm of my own.
Congratulations.
So I'm very, very grateful to everyone who's made that happen.
And your contact information is what, so that our viewers could contact you if they need some help?
My website is www.blackwellimmigration.com. My email is hannah@blackwellimmigration.com. That's HANNAH. And my direct line to my office is 773-951-9903.
I have another question. Are there specific neighborhoods that you're working with where there are large populations of immigrants?
I'm all over the city. People have been placed all over the city, specifically the Venezuelans right now. But obviously there are those bigger populations of people. So Pilsen, for instance, for Hispanics, Rogers Park for a lot of African immigrants and such, Portage Park for a lot of Polish immigrants. So definitely there are still those divides between where big communities have settled, but it is starting to get more scattered.
And what about the police? Do they ever contact you about maybe some client?
I actually contact the police.
Oh.
They don't contact me.
And in what circumstance would you contact the police?
I would contact them for a U visa. So we have to ask for certification to say, yes, this person is a victim of a crime. And as soon as they say yes, we go ahead.
In other words, get that police report.
Absolutely.
So they would come to you for help, and you would go to the police for the documentation.
Yes.
And then you would work the case.
Yes.
Okay.
As soon as we get the police report and certification from the police, then we can move forward with the actual immigration application. So it's a big process.
Yes. Well, Hannah Blackwell, thank you so much for joining us on Community Unity Now, the D Tycoon Show. This is Bill Morton, President of the Rogers Park Chamber of Commerce, and I am Trudy Leong, Administrator of the Rogers Park Chamber of Commerce. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you again next week.